York City. This is Charlie Rose.
With social scientist and health advocate Amy Farber and her story of how she met illness head-on.
What was so tricky for me was, why this disease? Why this pet disease? Why this boutique disease, right? Like, how am I going to get my head around this? So few women, I don't get it. Like, and that was a trick, and that was actually maybe what helped me to start drawing on my social science background, to start figuring out what the big picture stakes were.
Amy Farber is here. She is a social scientist and a health advocate. In April 2005, a little more than 15 months ago, she was diagnosed with Lymphangioleiomyomatosis. It is a rare, fatal lung disease that affects women in their childbearing years. Since her diagnosis, she has focused her attention on bringing awareness and funding to the disease. She has helped establish the LAM Center and co-created the LAM Treatment Alliance. I am pleased to have her at this table. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Let's just go through this.
Okay.
More than 13 months ago, you were in
good shape.
Great shape, right? No problems.
Always healthy.
Always healthy. Probably in your early 30s or something.
Yeah,
all right?
My early 30s.
You went to see the doctor.
About to start a family.
Yeah.
Thinking finally. Long training careers. Michael and I were finally ready.
Michael's your husband?
Husband.
Yeah.
Michael's my husband. Felt vague flank pain. So, you know, really vague and couldn't identify exactly where they were coming from. Not clear. Went to my primary care physician. Did a whole workup. Normal workup. Everything came back normal, including an x-ray of my chest. I didn't have breathing symptoms at all. And when this sort of discomfort persisted, I thought, you know, I really can't get pregnant without knowing what this is, because I know my body, and this just doesn't feel right.
Something's not right.
Something's not right. Very intuitive. And went back and said, we need, you know, decided with the care team we needed some more tests, and we got a CT scan of my kidneys. And the CT scan revealed a small lesion or mass of some kind next to my left kidney. And then at the tippy top of the scan of my kidneys, there were small scattered cysts in the base of my lungs. And that was the beginning of a long diagnostic process, which lasted for me 4 months, but for many women with this disease, over 4 years at times.
So it took them 4 months to finally come back to you and say?
Well, it was even more complicated than that. I went through a biopsy process, many tests and a long biopsy, seeing multiple specialists, because this particular kind of kidney tumor is associated with LAM in 50% of the women. So the idea was to diagnose this by proxy, to diagnose the LAM via the renal lesion. So we tried to do that, and the biopsy came back non-diagnostic. So then we really had to go for the lungs.
Non-diagnostic means?
Meaning it's almost like legalese, but it means no definitive diagnosis of what this is. But it didn't have clearly the signs of, it was between renal cell carcinoma and this lesion that goes with LAM, which is benign usually. So at that moment, I was in the position of really hoping it was renal cell, which was a really bizarre thing, because to catch renal cell early, take it out.
Right.
If it was LAM, which I would learn subsequently, once I could take some of this information in, you know, there's no treatment whatsoever. And so that was a different story, and it took me a while to get my head around that. So anyway, I went to the NIH, actually, to get a definitive diagnosis, which was via CT scan of my chest, my lungs, and it was a high-resolution CT that showed a pattern, a familiar pattern for women with LAM.
So somebody definitively said you have LAM?
Yeah.
And how many people have LAM, and what do we know about it?
Okay, good. So let's back up a second. So what is LAM? And I learned this, again, a little over a year ago, because I hadn't heard of it either, right? And that was sort of, it blew my mind. So LAM, what we know about LAM is it's a it's a multi-system disease, so it affects the lymphatics, it affects the kidneys and the lungs, and then it affects a lot of other things, but those are the major organs. And it's fatal in the lungs, so cysts progressively destroy healthy lung tissue, and over time women become dependent on supplemental oxygen until they die prematurely. Some women undergo transplants, but as you probably know, lung transplants are really difficult. First of all, there's a shortage of lungs, but also they're the most recent solid organ transplants of all, and they're tricky.
There is no treatment.
No, there's no treatment. So I left the NIH with, and they're wonderful at the NIH, but I left there with a 3-month supply of multivitamins and advice that I should think carefully about getting pregnant because the disease only affects women. So we think there may be something associated with hormones, increased exposure to estrogen.
Is there any evidence it's hereditary?
No, so we know there's a genetic basis to most diseases. So it doesn't have a genetic basis in the hereditary sense.
But there's a gene that somehow is responsible for this.
Precisely, one or more, right?
You left, obviously, devastated, to say the least.
Right. So I had been a health advocate in the past, and I had dedicated my intellectual and personal resources to looking at how natural and man-made, human-made disasters affected professionals and individuals and how people coped. Mm-hmm. And HIV/AIDS had been something that I cared a lot about, and I studied in South Africa. But I cared about distributive justice issues. I cared about, how big groups of people accessed basic health, education, and welfare. Things that just, that one needed to be human. And so part of the blow of this for me was that intellectually, how am I going to get on board as an advocate? How am I going to recognize myself in this role? How I really want to live, but how do I enfold my life experience so far into this, into my sort of my toolkit as I face this challenge?